My name is Livesley. I'm a trainer and consultant with Helen, Sanderson Associates, and today my workshop focused on care and support planning in practice and using a toolbox approach to capturing rich information from people to develop their care and support plans. And we've been using tools from this toolkit that we've been sharing with people at the conference. And all of the tools that we use help to frame good conversations that we're having with people. So in Doncaster, the assessment is done by the social worker. And what they're really focused on is making sure that they get clear outcomes to work towards. The intention then in Doncaster is that that assessment is handed over to the person, and if the person can develop their own support plan, brilliant, or has people around them that can help, brilliant. But if they need support to do that, it won't be the job of the social worker, it will be the job of a support planner. So that's a different way, a more radical way of thinking about support planning. Support planning has to be proportional, so we have to think about how much information do we need based on the outcomes. So this is a toolkit that helps us to choose different tools to frame some conversations so that we can capture information that's relevant. So rather than working through a lengthy form, we're thinking about conversations all the time. So I've just used my mum and my mum's support plan, care and support plan, as an example. So when my mum was first assessed for a care and support plan, it was in a very traditional way, and her outcome was deemed to be 3 visits a day and 2 baths a week, which is a very traditional way. And that's not an outcome, that's a potential solution. But actually, because we've not captured good information about what matters to my mum, how to keep her healthy and safe, and to think about her well-being, the whole of her life, which would be best practice around support planning, it's the wrong solution. So we need to start by capturing what matters to her. So my mum's outcomes, when we were really thinking about it, were to stay living in her own home in the street where everybody knew her. She lived in fear of going into residential care, and she was somebody who was at her best when she was in the centre of people who knew. She was the hub. She was somebody who was always the life and soul of the party, my mum. The reason she ended up needing a support plan and a budget was because her main carer, my stepdad, had suddenly died, and my sister became her full-time carer. My sister was a full-time nurse as well, so that created some problems. And one of the things that she also needed, because my mum had COPD, so she had some health needs, but she also had some other needs because she was suffering from depression, partly due to bereavement. And one of her other outcomes was to be able to talk about her late husband. So that was a problem at the time. But also, when my mum was assessed, she thought she needed 24-hour support and sleepovers in her own home. Particularly if Katie was at work, my sister, but actually she was assessed as needing 21 3/4 hours support, which was a real shock to her. It wasn't to me, but it was to my mum. So one of the other outcomes was to feel safe when she was home alone. So one of the things that we did was we looked at what was getting in the way of these outcomes, and that helped to start us thinking which of the tools in the toolkit would be helpful to use. So some of the things that were getting in the way was that her daughter was now the main carer and also a full-time nurse, so her time was split. Because of that, my mum was worried that she was becoming a burden on the family, and that was really contributing to her depression. When she tried to talk about a late husband to my sister got really upset and emotional, so that didn't work. So that wasn't an outlet for her. If she was in on her own, she didn't have the strength to make a meal, lift a kettle. She could only just walk to the downstairs toilet, so she couldn't actually fend for herself when she was at home. If there was a crisis, she couldn't actually get to the phone because she'd become breathless. So if there was something going wrong, she was likely to be more unwell and less likely to be able to get help. So she couldn't get to her phone, and she got really anxious consistently in case there's a power cut, because she had COPD, she was hooked up to a 24-hour oxygen machine, and she'd experienced some power cuts, and it had been a really difficult time for her. So these are some of the things that were getting in the way. So we then thought about, well, which tools might help us out of the toolbox to capture information that helps develop a support plan that meets her assessed need but takes into account what matters to her, the essence of her, and not just thinking about her needs but thinking about the whole of her life. So one of the things we did was we started by thinking about with her about what gave her a good and a bad day, and started to capture the essence of that. Just asking people what matters to them doesn't necessarily give you good information. So what we said was, tell us all the things that you look forward to if you know you're going to have a good day. What are the ingredients of that? If you know you're going to have a bad day, what do you think might happen? And that gave us some information that we could start to think about. We then captured that and developed a one-page profile, so knowing what was important to her and also what good support looked like. But also within that is knowing, well, what does she bring to the table herself? So just because she's got health and social care needs doesn't mean that she doesn't have stuff to give. So it was about really thinking about that with her too. And we created a one-page profile that told anybody who was going to spend time with her, whether that was a personal assistant, whether that was my sister, whether that was me, what mattered to her. And that was a summary on a page that gave us some rich information. We also needed to think about my mum's history. So what were the milestones in her life that actually might be useful to pay attention to while we're capturing a support plan. We also thought about the relationships that she had. So if she was wanting to stay living in her own home in the street where everybody knows her, then we need to think about what community resources that she's got. And actually, when we did that, what we realised was her next door but one neighbour, Beatrice, popped in every morning anyway. So we asked Beatrice how would she feel about coming in and making my mum her breakfast so that she could have her medication, and in return she could have a breakfast with my mum. So that was often bacon and egg. Beatrice was really up for that, but actually my mum didn't feel like she was taking from a friend. She felt like it was a reciprocal arrangement. It felt really natural, but what it actually did, it meant that we could utilise my mum's support package hours, so a personal assistant that was paid differently within that arrangement. We also thought about community connections, so feeling safe for my mum wasn't just about in the house, it was about the threat of anybody coming in, and she was absolutely insistent that people could pop in every day, so she always had the door open. So we talked to people within the street and said, my mum really loves it when you're popping in, but can you make an effort to do that? So, you know, rather that being something that you might do, if you're popping past, could you knock on the window and see if she wants something from the shop, or see if she needs a cup of tea? And actually, because she'd been a community builder in her life, and she would never have described that, people were more than willing to help her out as she'd helped others out. We also used the working, not working tool, so thinking about current reality and doing analysis, starting with my mum's perspective, thinking about my sister and the rest of the family's perspective, and then thinking about anybody else, so what professionals are in my mum's life, so that we could create some conversations that address what's not working without undermining what's going well. From that, we looked at, well, what would my mum's perfect balanced week, because it's not enough just to stay healthy and safe. We have to think about what makes it worth being healthy and safe, what makes life worth living. And we created my mum's perfect balanced week, so that any paid support and any family support was not just maintaining her being at home, but was supporting her to have a good life. So these tools really helped us to frame some conversations that helped to meet the assessed need around her budget, but also create a support plan to enable her to have a good life.